Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Sleep Strategy webinar. My name is Catherine from Denver Natural Mom, and I want to thank our sponsor, Baby & Company, for putting together this fantastic panel of sleep experts. And we are going to be really diving into newborns through the first year. So thank you for submitting questions. Those of you who sent in questions ahead of time, we're going to be have a lot to talk about. So I'd like to just introduce our panelists and kind of run down the line and let them tell you a little bit about their background and how they support families, specifically new families, and the work that they do with sleep. So Rochelle, would you start for us?
Sure. My name is Rochelle Gershkovich, and I specialize in sleep and nutrition for infants, and I have an agency, Maternal Instincts. We go into homes and take care of babies, typically one-on-one, and then we offer a couple of sleep groups around town to support moms in more of a group setting.
Great. I just got a message that we might have failed to go live. So if anybody's watching right now, can you use the chat window to tell us that you can see us? Never had that happen. It does say we're live right now, but want to make sure this is actually, it says we're broadcasting, so I guess we're gonna roll with it unless somebody tells us otherwise. Oh, you are live. Thank you, Christine, Hillary, Nicole. We need those affirmations to keep us on track, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, Patience, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm a child development specialist and a parenting coach, and I have been for about 15 years. I run the Family Room in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, where we offer tons of support for families all the way from conception through kindergarten. So in terms of sleep, we offer sleep group twice a week on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and then I do private consulting and consultation, either in office or via online. I have clients all over the country. So.
Great, thanks, Patience. And last but not least, Danielle, tell us about you.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. So I'm a childbirth educator with Baby & Company. I've been there since the start. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. We've welcomed 60 babies, and I teach childbirth preparation classes as well as newborn and postpartum care. And one of my favorite parts of my job is I facilitate really, a 6-week postpartum mom-baby group that the same group of women comes for 6 weeks in a row, builds community, and learns a little bit about various aspects of wellness. So sleep certainly comes into play with various aspects of my job at Baby & Company.
Great. Well, welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And you're absolutely right. Sleep is a big piece of health for everybody, mom and baby. To kick us off, I would love to just really dive into kind of that newborn phase and talk about kind of what's a normal expectation for a newborn's routine. And then I kind of want to follow that up and talk about feeding and how food really connects and relates to sleep. So I know that there's plenty of you guys that can talk for hours on this. Patience, do you want to start?
Specifically talking about newborn expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So the first month or two of life for a new baby is all about transitioning into being out of the womb and being in the world and mastering using those automatic systems. So learning to breathe, learning to digest, learning to control body movements, figuring out how to sustain the heart rate and the temperature and what all that looks like. The sleep system is like the bottom rung of all of those other systems. So oftentimes it's the parent's main goal to get sleep consolidated, but for the baby, it's really at the bottom of their priority list. The nice thing is that in those first couple of months, figuring all of those things out makes them really, really sleepy. So they want to sleep a lot. They have short sleep cycles, they have small stomachs, and so need to eat very, very often. Once a newborn is gaining well, up over their birth weight, then we can start to have a little bit in terms of expectation of how long of a stretch they might be able to do for you at night. most baby newborns, if they're gaining well and over their birth weight, can do a 4-hour stretch of no food and sleep one time in a 24-hour period. The trick is matching that up with your bedtime so that you can take advantage of that one stretch of sleep that they'll do long for you.
Great. Rochelle, is there anything that you want to add here, or maybe kind of bringing in some of the nutritional requirements too? That, 'cause I know that's really your background in training, and I think that's really interesting for parents.
Yeah, I guess I love what Patience said, because the reality is that they're just growing still. They have so many underdeveloped systems that are trying to work through this new stage of development, and we talk about it as like a fourth trimester. It really is very hands-on, and they're just trying to thrive and grow and succeed in all of these challenges that they're facing outside of the womb. The biggest one would be, for them, it's going to be their nutrients and making sure that they're gaining weight and their body's needing the proteins and the fats that it needs so that the muscle repair and the brain development and all of these things that are going so rapidly are being met with their nutrition. And obviously that just means frequent feeds. For a breastfeeding mom, you're at the breast, frequently, and for some more frequently than others, but we like it to be within the 2-hour period. And then with your bottle-fed babies, you want to imitate a breastfeeding baby. You want to make sure that when they are eating, it varies per feed, that some bottles are bigger than others, and that you don't try to push each feed to be the same, so that they can kind of follow what their body's needing to do and following their own development. And then how that affects sleep is, at least for the first 2 to 3 months, they're working on developing their circadian rhythm. So it goes through 3 stages, and each stage is from stage 1, right at birth with their temperature, through stage 2 and 3, which come closer to the 12-week mark, between 8 and 12 weeks. And so that is one of their last developing systems in the first couple of weeks, and it comes slowly. But they do start to figure it out pretty quick that there's a difference of day and night. And when they do get their 4-hour stretch and mom gets her 4-hour stretch, they can do it all together at nighttime. It's just about syncing yourself up with your baby and supporting both of your systems the best you can, knowing that they're on 24 hours and you're on 12 and 12.
Mm-hmm. So I know sometimes it gets tricky when we talk about sleep to give like absolute numbers. So I don't want to, I'm not going to force you guys to do that, but like I know with feeding in the beginning, it's 8 to 12 times every 24-hour periods, and so we can also expect our babies then to like take little naps 8 to 12 times. Is that appropriate or reasonable if we're trying to quantify?
I think that's very appropriate, but I can tell you a little bit about the stomach and how it grows in the first at least month, because in the very first days you're talking about 5 to 7 milliliters of colostrum. It's just so small. Their bellies are just so tiny, the amount of food that they're taking is so small, but very quickly by day 7, by day 14, by 1 month, these increments are constantly growing and changing. So you're going to see that they're moving at this lightning speed, and their food is increasing, and their sleep is going to be around the clock. But the easiest way to do it is, yes, if you're talking about 8 to 12 feeds a day and 8 to 12 naps a day, that's an easy way to keep up with it. It's good to understand how big their stomach is, though, so that you have a good understanding of how much food they are taking in, and thinking about 30 milliliters, 1 ounce. Okay, that's going to maybe last me an hour. So if you know your baby's having these small frequent feeds, it's easier and for myself to understand and be a little bit more open to the fact that, yes, my baby already needs to eat again, even though it's only been an hour. But they only took 30 milliliters, so it makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. Great. So one thing that I think is an important element of this is getting rest for the mom. And Danielle, I think this is where you really shine in your work with brand new moms, and how we feel as rested and refreshed as possible, like regardless of baby schedule. But what are some of the things that mom can do, or parents can do, and partners can do to kind of maximize the rest that we do get, even if it is a half an hour or an hour?
One thing that I really like to talk to new or expectant parents about is changing expectations. So right now, before we become parents for the first time especially, we tend to think about, gearing up, getting ready for bed, which is going to be 6 or 8 or 10, for luxurious hours. When we have a new baby, especially those first weeks and months, if we can reframe the way we think about it and really start to think about it in terms of a 24-hour series of naps, then I think that really sets us up for more success, even just from an emotional perspective, because we're not gearing up to go to bed and then finding that bedtime only lasted 3 hours. Instead, if we wake up from a 3-hour nap, we feel pretty amazing about that, right? So that's a really big change in expectation, I think, and just that alone can go a long way in terms of understanding how we feel about the sleep we're getting. And then I think that partner support is really huge. So when you get into a little bit of a rhythm with the breastfeeding and with everything else, I think there are clear ways that we can have partner help. Maybe that is get up with the baby for the time that's more the console and not the feed time, and then that partner can take that, the mom can have a more solid chunk of rest. And I know we hear it to no end, and it's kind of cliche at this point, but it's really true. The idea of sleeping when the baby sleeps, and for some of us, the idea of naps during the day is just so ridiculous before, as we're working people before we've gone down this parenthood road. But it's so, so important to be able to catch that rest even during the day and really let everything else go, which especially in our culture is maybe one of the hardest things, but that pile of laundry, that stack of dishes, that it really, really is okay to give ourselves some grace and let it all go for the first few months of parenting. We are adjusting to so many changes, especially, again, the first time that we do this, that it's just really important to keep reminding ourselves that it's okay.
Yeah, I want to open this up to Rochelle and patients. Do you guys have things, just tips that you've seen from working with families that helps kind of with the sanity piece of sleep, or even just the practical like household functioning and keeping everything going when everyone's transitioning?
There's so many things, and I think one of the things that we have to remember about sleep in family situations is that it has so much more to do with your individual family than it has to do with what it's supposed to look like. You might be a family and somebody who doesn't like to go to bed until 11, and everyone tells you your baby's supposed to go to sleep before 11. Well, that's ridiculous. If you're getting in bed at 11 and your young infant goes to sleep for their long stretch when you go to sleep, that's going to be what makes the most sense for you. If you're an early riser and you like to be in bed by 8, then your baby should go to bed at 8, so that it's working with what your rhythms in your family life is like. And again, like we've already talked about in terms of expectation, understanding developmentally what's appropriate, what the expectations are. Oftentimes new parents want a schedule. They're like, what is this? What schedule should my baby be on? What should it look like? How many naps? How long should they be awake for? And it's so variable from baby to baby. Yeah, there's some generals that we can make, but that doesn't mean that your baby fits into that mid-zone average. So really understanding that, what you need and allowing yourself permission to say, I need to go to bed at this time, or I need to stay in bed until this time, or I, need the baby to be someone to take the baby away in the middle of the day so that I can take a nap totally by myself. Giving yourself permission to know what your needs are and express those needs so that they can be supported in a way that is going to allow you to get the kind of sleep that you need.
Those are great tips and great things to remember and be mindful of. Rochelle, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in on this if you have something to add.
Yeah, I think that I'm the kind of person who has a hard time with leaving a dish full of dishes at the sink. It's just my personality type. So it's easy for me to say, I would love to do that, but the reality of me implementing that is much different. So the way that I was able to manage it better with my children or my families that I work with that have a hard time with relaxing and letting things go when they need to fix their to-do list or they need to check marks off of their to-do list is to do it in series between these feeds and these naps. So if it's go throw a load of laundry in the washer and then sit down and do a breastfeeding session, take a nap, spend some time. Next time baby wakes up to eat, feed baby, baby's laying down, go move the clothes from the washer to the dryer. But it's not all needing to be done at the right moment and the right time. It's about balancing yourself throughout the entire day and making sure that you're proud of yourself for getting the things done that you are getting done. And yes, giving yourself the slack to understand that it's not all going to work out the exact same way every single day, but understanding that you still can get your tasks done in a different pattern. Opening yourself up to some different things. And then for nighttime, I really like to have my parents go into their sleep space and enjoy that time together. And having baby near you is really important for the first couple of months because it allows you to get to your baby quickly, and it allows your baby to not need to escalate all the way to the point where they're needing a lot more soothing to calm back down. The whole process is a little bit easier. It's easier for you. It's easier for your baby, keeping your lights dark in the nighttime, supporting your sleep cycles as well as supporting your babies by having a little stimulation at nighttime will help you get back to sleep quickly as well, not turning your phone on, not scrolling through your feed to read your Facebook messages, supporting yourself as well through the process so you can get back to bed as quickly as your baby gets back to bed in between the feedings and the sleeping.
Those are such great points, especially when you mentioned the electronics, because that we all know that that's not great for sleep, even if you don't have a new baby at home. So, to be mindful of like letting us all get back to our peaceful states. So we do have several questions that have been submitted, and I would just want to remind you guys that the chat window is open. We have a few of you guys on live, so feel free to add something if something strikes you or you have a question about what we're talking about. And I think now that we've kind of covered this, initial stage, which is so much about change, and the babies are changing so rapidly, and we're getting used to so much. I do want to start asking about babies that are a little bit older. And somebody said, my daughter is 10 weeks old and won't take a pacifier. Do you have strategies to teach her to fall asleep on her own where I don't nurse her? This seems to be the only reliable way to get her to sleep. So maybe we can back up a little bit and just look at kind of 10 weeks and what developmentally can we expect from a baby? Does it make sense that she would be able to fall asleep on her own at 10 weeks? Or, I guess let's first of all tell this mom that she's normal and her baby's normal, right? And maybe offer some insights. So anybody want to jump into this one first?
Yeah. Sure, I can say something about it. I think that at 10 weeks, developmentally, I think that Patience is going to have some great advice for this. My piece of advice is different soothing techniques. Is that it doesn't have to be a binky that puts a baby to sleep. It doesn't have to be the breast that puts a baby to sleep. The food is so comforting. It's comforting when we eat food. It's comforting when a baby eats food. There's so many great feelings and hormones that are released when we're eating food that it feels so good that it's associated very tightly to going to sleep. And it should be that way in the beginning. So it's not uncommon for milk and breastfeeding to put a baby to sleep. But there are other things you can do as well if it's not a time that is needing to be a feed. So you can eliminate that the baby's hungry. You've already done a feed, or you're shortly after a feed but baby's still unsettled. You can do different things for soothing. But keeping yourself calm and keeping your cortisol levels at a very calm state and relaxing your nervous system is going to support your baby in a much stronger level than anything else. So the more calm you can stay, whether you're using a binky or you're shushing or you're patting or you're rubbing, whatever you're doing to help support your baby, the more calm you can stay, the more easily baby's able to calm down.
Yeah, and then, looking at it more from a developmental standpoint, the whole idea of self-soothing is one that I would really like to get out of our vocabulary with infants. The brain itself does not have the ability to bring itself out of stress on its own until a child is 5 years old. So a very young infant isn't going to be able to soothe themselves down. They can self-regulate, which is a very different thing. Soothing is when I'm upset and I can bring myself back to being calm. Regulating is the ability to keep myself from losing it. And very, very young infants aren't good at either of those. As an infant starts to get older, they can learn some self-regulating skills, and they do those through repetitive movements, which is what sucking is. They do that with body adjustments. They do that by calling out for help. That's actually their number one way that they say, I need some help, I'm having a hard time. The the thing about nursing to sleep is we really need to debunk that nursing a baby to sleep is a bad habit or a problem. It's one of the best ways to support your baby's system in the early stages. It regulates the nervous system through sucking. It fills the stomach up, so then your baby's not going to have to wake up early because they're hungry to eat. It increases oxytocin, which is a soothing and sleep hormone. So it's this perfect combination cocktail to move your baby from wake into sleep. The research that's been done shows that it isn't well until the first year and closer to a year and a half that the way a baby falls asleep impacts how they stay asleep. So nursing a baby to sleep isn't going to cause problems with how your baby is able to maintain sleep at night, especially in those early weeks and months. If you're wanting to sort of expand your repertoire of ways to help soothe your baby down, you know, what Rochelle was saying was one of the best things you can do is more of like check your own nervous system. We often, when our babies get upset, we get worried and nervous and we start to panic and, you know, freak out, which then prevents our baby from being able to calm down because we're so nervous about that they're upset. The only caveat to that is be careful what other soothing techniques you decide to use, because you can catch yourself into doing something you don't really want to be doing, like driving around in the car to get your baby to nap. If that's not something that you're going to want to do, it's best to just not do it at all. Your baby will be fine. They will eventually fall asleep in a different way. So just don't worry about it if that's the tool you have, especially when your baby's really, really little. They'll develop and learn some other skills and have some other abilities as they get older.
And patients, to clarify, like in your mind, 10 weeks is still little.
10 weeks is itty bitty. So 10 weeks is 70 days. That's like teeny, teeny, tiny. Hardly been out in the world at all. There's very little time to, I mean, they've just figured out and mastered how to maybe eat, let alone regulate their nervous system.
Okay, Danielle, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, just a couple of little practical things that I tend to see parents do. One, we have all these great apps now and everything for timing and feedings and sleep and changes and poops and pees and all this stuff, and it's great and it's really good. At the birth center, we recommend, you know, for the first couple of weeks as we're learning and we're needing to track those things, to use those. And then I always tell people after that first couple of weeks, I think it's a great idea to get rid of that from your phone and to start to really tune into your baby and look at your baby and interact with your baby and watch for their natural cues, because I think that can tell you a lot about what's going on. And I totally hear what Patience is saying as far as having the baby's sleep time work with your family, but I also find that sometimes we're surprised that babies' first sleep cues in the evening are earlier than we would sometimes like, but also jumping on that instead of and recognizing and acknowledging that like 6:30 we could call it a nap, but that might be a time that the baby wants to sleep for a little while and we're just trying to gear up for dinner, you know, whatever, to go ahead and honor that first rub of the eye and start our bedtime routine, which is, I also think, even with a tiny baby like a 10-week-old, can be a great thing, even as you guys were pointing out, for our own calming, I guess. So instituting some kind of a sleep routine leading up to sleep can be really helpful for the whole family. And that does not have to be an hour-long project. That could be just a few little steps that I think could be really helpful in terms of initiating that idea of like, we're headed towards sleep now. Most of the sleep concepts seem to start with that way, some kind of a routine that we can implement. And again, I think it's helpful and calming for us to know that we're kind of headed down that road towards sleep as parents.
Yeah, 6:30 doesn't seem that early. I mean, I'm like, oh, that'd be nice to go to bed sometimes at 6:30 with a little baby. But Danielle, that was a great segue into something you mentioned, baby's cues. And I think this is definitely an area that especially the first time through, it's hard to, takes us a while to recognize, like, oh wait, this is happening every night or this every day, or, you know, this pattern is emerging. And I like also the recommendation to ditch the app, because then we can kind of see and observe. So can we talk a little bit about cues? Like, what are some some ways that you mentioned rubbing eyes and stuff, but Rochelle, I know this is a like a soapbox for you, cues, which I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean it in a good way, because reading babies and interpreting them, and you know, especially the first time around, we just don't know what this stuff means. So I'd love to have you elaborate.
I just feel like we're such instinctually based species of humans, and we really like to feel our emotions and express our emotions that way. So if you can sync yourself up with your baby and really just start trusting your instincts, you'll see how far it takes you. And I love just watching little babies. I mean, they tell you so much just through their grunts and their moans and their movements. I'm fascinated by it on my own level, but as a parent, you just love and adore watching your own child. They're beautiful, and they're growing so quickly, and they're intelligent, and there's just so much about them that intrigues a parent to watch them. If you can allow yourself, yes, to put the apps away and put the things down and focus on your baby, you're going to start to notice what they're saying to you. And that a cry is not just a cry, and a grunt isn't just a grunt anymore. So when you see your baby rooting, and you're like, oh, it's so cute, look, they think they want the blanket to suck on. Well, maybe they don't just want the blanket to suck on. Maybe that's their first signal to tell you, I want some milk. I'm kind of hungry now. Instead of waiting to the last signal, which is the crying, to try to then put them to the breast. So if you get the opportunity to focus on these things and see the steps in a preventative way, you can get to them and work with them in a much more effective way. So things like a rooting of a baby and turning their mouth side to side, they have a ton of reflexes on the face. So yes, when something touches them, they're going to turn towards it, and that's a survival mechanism. But it's also their first way of telling you that they're hungry long before they get to the point of crying. The same thing is when they're dreaming. Their eyes are going to go through REM sleep, and their eyes are going to be moving, and sometimes that's happening with their eyes open, and that's very confusing for a parent to see that their eyes are open but a baby is sleeping. But it's part of the way that they're learning all of these things in their new world, and that sleep does happen sometimes with eyes open. I think my favorite for a sign of communication between a baby and a mom is when a baby is full. Because I feel like a lot of parents will ask me, well, I don't know if they ate enough. Because breastfeeding in the very beginning tends to take a long time. Very quickly, even we were talking about a 10-week-old baby, even by 10 weeks old, you start to notice that they're so much more efficient at eating, and they're getting through it faster, and sometimes they're only going to be on one breast, and they're not going to both breasts. And for a parent, that's can be nerve-wracking because you think that they're not eating enough. So I like the sign of empty to full. And so a baby's hand will be up, and they're going to pull their hands by the bottle or breast because they're looking for their source of food. So they're going to have their hands up looking for their food, and as they start to fill up, their hands gently come down all the way to the point of being relaxed at their side, and that's when they're full. So if your baby has only fed for 7 minutes on one breast, but their hands are down and they're calm, trust that they know that they're full, and trust that they have the ability to tell you these things through their signs and through their body language.
Yeah, I love that one, and I think somebody called it like their gas gauge before, but it's not even just the position, but like the tension, like when they're really hungry, like their fists are closed, right? And then they can like open up and kind of chill out when they've had enough. So patients, jump in on this, because I know that you studied babies and seen tons, so tell us what you think about cues we need to be kind of observing.
Well, I think one of the big things is that cues change over time. So when you have a very young infant, their sleep cues can be somewhat subtle, and like Danielle was saying, we got to catch those early and quick, because new little babies get overwhelmed and overtired very, very, very quickly, and if we miss the window, it can ruin and make sleep just a lot harder over the next couple of hours. But that significantly changes as your baby gets older. Your 6, 8, 9-month-old doesn't need a nap the first time that they yawn, because yawning is also a way to say, I'm working on this and I want to keep working on it, and I'm kind of tired because I'm working hard, but that doesn't mean I need to go to sleep right now. It may mean I need a little bit of a break, or I need you to pick me up and give me a snack, but it doesn't necessarily mean now it's time for a nap. And what can happen is, especially for a new parent, that first-time parent, you've just figured out, like it took you 2.5 to 3 months to figure out all those baby cues, and you're so excited that you know them now that you're still responding to them in the same way with your 6-month-old as you were with your 3-month-old, and their needs are very different. Your 6-month-old needs to be awake for a little bit longer. They need to work. They need to get a little bit more tired before they go down for a nap. And what happens if we read the cues the same way is that that parent of that, 7, 8-month-old is spending 45 minutes trying to get a nap in, and the baby's not sleeping, and then they finally get them to sleep, and they sleep for 15 minutes, and then they didn't really sleep, they weren't really awake, and it creates this interesting overtired, overslept phenomenon all at the same time. So there's a change in cues that happen. As children start to get toward that, middle to end of the first year, a yawn and an eye rub does not necessarily mean I need to go to sleep right away anymore.
So patients, how do you, just to follow up to that, because I know that's something we hear all the time. It's like, I have to rock my baby for 45 minutes to get them down. What do you tell that mom?
Yeah, so usually I recommend that you don't spend more than 15 to 20 minutes trying to get a baby to sleep, an older infant. A very young infant, we might need to do that because they're so disorganized and maybe slightly overtired. We might need to put a little bit more work in. But typically for that infant that's over 4 or 5 months, 15 minutes is as much time as you want to spend working on sleep. Because what happens is we decrease that homeostatic drive to sleep, which really runs the show in the first year to year and a half. The circadian rhythms are there, but the sleep till I'm rested, wake up and be awake until I'm tired is really what runs the show. And if we decrease that drive by keeping them in drowsy, in this like half awake, half asleep, rocking, but I'm not active, I'm not awake, I'm not sleeping, that makes it very difficult for their system to stay in balance and to sleep well when they're tired and to be happy when they're awake. So, don't spend your whole day trying to get your baby to sleep. If they're not sleeping, get up, get active, and within another half an hour, 40 minutes, you'll usually see those sleep cues again, and you'll be much more successful at that point getting a good nap to happen.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Basically, you're saying, like, the middle is damaging. Either go be active or be completely asleep, but that kind of like, and actually I have very distinct memories that was when I would be like me as mom kind of freaking out because we're like looking at the clock. I'm like, this nap is just not happening, So, anyway, you mentioned 8 months old, and it's funny because we had 2 different questions come in from moms with kids that are 8 months old. So I want to throw those out there. And the first was kind of just general, what is normal at that age? And I think we kind of got into that a little bit, patients just talking about how a shift has happened by 8 months, that they do need to be awake more often. They need a little more stimulation to be able to go down. And this other mama said, my 8-month-old is pulling up to stand. We had to lower his crib. We usually rock him to sleep and then transfer him into the crib. But with the lowered crib, it's impossible to transfer him without waking him up. So I was considering layering several mattresses so I don't have to lower him as far, or taking the mattress out and doing a floor bed. What would you recommend? And I think transfer in general, maybe we should just open this up, because the transfer is like a scary proposition. Your baby's asleep in your arms and you want to move the laundry into the dryer. So maybe you guys, and this is good because I know just moms who've had multiple children, which you guys all do, can give insights about your best transfer tricks and tips. So who wants to start?
All right, I guess I'll start.
Yeah, do it.
So depending on the age of your baby, the transfer is going to be really different. Learning to sleep alone is a skill that we kind of have to learn. Where we sleep in sleep environments and sleeping arrangements are totally culturally determined. There are some cultures where you never sleep alone, and that's considered taboo, and you don't do it. And then in our culture, we're very much more a very independent sleeping culture, and we want to sleep alone, and we want our children to sleep alone, and that's like the ideal, is to sleep alone. And so small infants have learned, and we sort of evolutionary came from this place of, I need to be close to my care provider or I could be in big trouble. And so we have to sort of teach our young infants that they're safe to sleep away from us and that we're still going to show up. So it's a little bit of a process to the nervous system, because in that transition, they're and that drop away from your body and down into it stimulates their moro, or their falling reflex, and so they're going to be like, what's wrong? I need to grab onto something and wake up. And so mitigating that drop can be really important, which makes cribs like the most ridiculous invention for infant sleep ever. So when you're making that transition, if you can keep your baby as close to you as possible, take your time, take it slow, and then when you get your baby down, don't just take off and leave. Because if they learn you put me down and then you disappear, their likelihood of wanting to stay down is going to be less and less versus more and more. So that's just my word on transitions in general. The other thing is, just because they start to rustle or move once you've transitioned them down doesn't mean you go all the way back to like rocking them at the highest level you were before. You know, take it back as far as you need to, but then keep moving forward. And when you first are working on helping a baby learn to transition down, it can take a half an hour to 40 minutes to get them to stay down. And then they stay down for 20 minutes and then their nap's over. But they stay down for a little bit of time. And then that can just keep increasing as they get older. You know, in this particular question of this mom with her older infant, stacking mattresses is going to defeat the safety purpose of the crib. So from a safety perspective, that's not a good idea. That would be the same as leaving the mattress up high in the crib and creating an issue for the baby to fall out. So I love floor beds. I think floor beds are fantastic for a lot of reasons. They allow babies to fall asleep on the sleep surface they're going to stay asleep on. You're able to soothe them down in that sleep space, and you're the one who's moving away versus moving your baby when they're asleep. And then you just create the room as the safe zone and the baby-proofed area. A lot of people worry about their babies crawling off their beds when they have floor beds, and really surprisingly most don't, especially if they're not mobile yet when you put them on a floor bed, and then they never realize, you know, their only way to have you show up is to call out to you, and so they continue to use that. It's not the right choice for everyone, but it's definitely a very viable choice, and often the safest and most compatible for getting your baby to sleep on their own mattress.
Great, thank you, Patience. Danielle, do you want to add anything about, you know, transferring or floor beds or any of these topics? Or
I was going to say the same as Patience about the floor bed. That sounds, in this particular case, like it would probably be the most reasonable option for this family, and especially in cases where, and I'm reading between the lines, you might be doing some bed sharing during that first year, which I think is a lot more common and normal than probably people report, but that's just kind of a side conversation as far as sleep goes. I think a floor bed could be a really good option, and that transitions really well into toddlerhood, you know, in terms of how that next phase of the sleep would go. And mostly, I guess, on that point, I just want to, and I try to let people know in general that it's really about finding what works best for your family. It's really not a one-size-fits-all, and I think people can beat themselves up a lot about we're not doing it the right way, or the way the book says, or the way my mom says, and that's just, we learn pretty quickly. I think one of you already said, I think that your gut, I say this all the time, is absolutely our best parenting tool, and so a lot of that is just trusting our gut and going ahead and going with that option that we already know is right for us.
That's great. How about you, Rochelle? And then I'm going to maybe piggyback on another question that's popping in our chat window.
Sure. Patients kind of touched on the fact that it changes over time. So when you have a little bitty baby, it does matter a lot that you're holding them and you're transferring with your body, that everything's done with your body so that they aren't running into that moro reflex, startling them and making them nervous at the fall of going down to a sleep space. So the little bitties you're going to transfer with your whole body. For this mom who has an 8-month-old who's still in the crib, maybe going to come out of the crib type situation, I guess my best tip would be to do it during the daytime, to practice during the daytime. When you're doing a nap in the daytime, practice laying baby down and sit down on the floor next to the crib. A lot of times I'll put my arm through the slat and I'll just make sure that they know that I'm still there. It's not running out of the room right away. You're teaching a skill, so it takes time and it takes patience and it takes you understanding that this isn't going to happen right now, but over the longevity of the next couple of weeks, I'm going to establish having taught this skill to my child. So sitting down, supporting them through it, talking them through. An 8-month-old baby, you can talk a lot. You can tell them so many things. They understand cognitively what you're saying. I just carry both sides of the conversation. So I know that you're frustrated, but I'm here for you, and I'm not going anywhere. So let's calm down and rest. And they'll trust you and that your support is going to be there. And you just make sure that you follow up on your side of the deal, that you're going to stick through the whole process with them. I like to do that during the daytime because it's just nap. This is a 1-2 hour process versus a nighttime, which is a whole night affair. So I like to practice a lot of my skills in the daytime before I implement them at nighttime.
That's a great point, Rochelle. And so I want to jump in and start with you with this question, but one of our moms is asking about, every time she wants to sleep train, she feels like her son is going through a developmental change or he's sick, and she says she can count on one hand how many times she's had more than a 4-hour stretch. Now, so she has an 8-month-old, and somebody else said, what is the right age where they no longer need nighttime feeds? So I know those are kind of two things, but maybe we can kind of address some of that together. And Rochelle, I'd love to come back to you and get you to kick us off there.
Okay. So yeah, two sides of the question. One would be developmentally, yes, your children are going through these changes constantly. You're going to run into a lot of different scenarios. An 8-month-old baby is not just running into digestive issues or growth and development. They're running into a little bit of separation anxiety, not a little bit. You're kind of rearing in full force at this age. So they're noticing that there's a fear in the world that they had never even experienced before, that if mom leaves, is she coming back? Which was never a question that they ran into before. It was just cry out and she'll come when she comes. This is a completely different stage where they start to worry about who in their life is coming and going and how long they're coming and going and keeping tabs on what's going on around them. They're just so cognitive of their environment. So making a transition at 8 months old is a little bit more difficult. In my opinion, I think that it's requires a different set of skills, and that set of skills, I think, is communication. If you're very clear with your communication on your child, they're going to understand what's going on and why, and you should talk through the process. It should be something that you've put into place as a plan, and this is something that you're going to do together as a family, and you're going to work through what works for your family step by step, but this is a plan that you guys have already talked about. So I start with my babies a couple days ahead of time, and this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is why we're going to do it. And I go through every step, and it's every single day talking about this, and then when we go to put it into place at nighttime, we're going to bed at this time because it's bedtime and you start your routine. I do like bedtime routines because it creates a healthy association to starting the nighttime of sleep. So a baby can see, first I did this, then I did this, then I did this, and then it was bedtime, and they can depend on that same routine happening, and they can depend on you sticking through the same process every single night. So they have this association to what we're doing for bedtime, and that there's a happiness about it. It shouldn't be this stressful, crazy event. It should be very calm. But setting them up for, this is when we're starting our bedtime, and then if, let's say, 4 hours, we're talking 4 hours. Baby wakes up at 4 hours, then mom has gone through her daytime to make sure that this wake is not food related, that this is not a baby who's needing the food, the weight is where it needs to be, the food intake in the daytime is where it needs to be, then she can support her baby without the food being the support, but a lot of other things need to be the support, and it's going to be very important that she stays and supports her baby through the entire wake. I really don't like independent crying or soothing. It doesn't teach anything. It doesn't provide any type of benefit for a baby at this age, so it's really important that she comes and she's like, okay, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together, and a baby responds very well to that if they know what's happening, especially at 8 months old. To talk about the food side of things at this age, caloric intake has changed drastically in the last 2 months. We're not fully dependent on milk as much anymore. It depends on milk intake. Calories are much higher. The easiest way to calculate exactly what your baby needs is to take their weight and multiply it by 55. You'll get your calories that you need. Then you have to go through and kind of do the math of where they're getting the calories from. If it's some from solid foods, predominantly from milk, it should still be predominantly from milk. But it gives you a little bit more of an understanding of how much your baby should have each day to support certain hours of sleep at nighttime. They're not going to get those long stretches at nighttime if they're genuinely hungry. You have to eliminate the fact that they need those calories. They have to get the calories at a different time.
So, and just to clarify, when you're saying day, you really mean a 24-hour period, right? So if the calorie requirement is met when the sun is up, then we can assume that when the sun is down, it's fair that they would be asleep, that they can sustain themselves through those hours. Is that right, Rochelle? I just want to make sure that.
Right. So calories are counted in a 24-hour period. So if they're needing, I'm going to say 750 calories in that daytime, then that's going to, if you can get that all in the daytime, if a baby's used to having multiple feeds at nighttime, it's going to be very hard to immediately transfer all of that over. It's a process. And each transfer takes usually 3 to 5 days for the digestive system to accept that new transfer of calories. Switching over the metabolism triggers when it's usually every 2 hours, but also when it's habitually been fed. So if the habit has been at midnight, the baby's been fed, the body's going to say, hey, it's time to eat. This is a habit we've created, and it's not a negative habit. I don't want it to be put on as this is a bad thing. That was what was needed then, and now we're moving forward to a different option, which is pushing that feed a little bit further. It's going to take a couple of days of support to do that, and you're doing it one feed at a time. So if you're increasing your calories in the daytime and you're pushing your first feed at nighttime, it's only one. You're not going to go for the whole shebang all night long. You're starting on a gradual progression of one feed at a time.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that. Patients, Danielle, do you guys want to jump in on this question about, when do they no longer need night feeds, or by 8 months, should this mama be sleeping more than 4 hours in a stretch?
Yeah, the thing about sleep is, like Rochelle has touched on, sleep isn't a standalone system. No one system in our body works independently of the other systems. And if we just look at sleep as its own thing, we're missing a huge picture. Also, if you just look at night sleep and don't look at day sleep and don't look at total number of hours of sleep, as well as activity levels, that's all going to play into what the sleep is really actually going to look like. So, the food is the one first piece that we look at. How much does this baby weigh? At 8 months, if your baby's still only 14 pounds, it might be really hard to get more than a 4-hour stretch because their stomach's just really not big enough to get all of those calories in all during the day. Probably we can get more than a 4-hour stretch, but at 8 months, but maybe it can only be 6 hours, not 8 or 10. So we have to look at that whole system. Are we working and doing, how much daytime sleep is there? Is there 3 to 4 hours of daytime sleep? That's really, really high for an 8-month-old. And so therefore, if they've used up that sleep during the day, it's going to be harder for them to maintain sleep without a lot of help through the night or without numerous waking. So you have to kind of look at the whole formula and go, okay, where are the calories? Get those moved. What's the sleep balance between day and night and what my needs as an 8-month, are? How active am I? Am I crawling yet? Am I crawling well? Am I not crawling? How many calories am I burning? And how exhausted am I getting during the day will also impact. I find a lot of 8 to 10-month-olds who are not moving yet will have a significant dip in their total amount of sleep that they need because they're not active enough. They're not getting tired enough yet. And then after they start crawling and moving around, the sleep needs bump back up again. So we have to look at the full spectrum to figure out how is going to be the way to improve it. Because if we just say, okay, well, I'm going to stop picking you up and stop feeding you at this particular time, but we don't look at anything else, that may or may not help your baby sleep longer.
Patience, thank you for pointing that out, that how interconnected all of this is with everything else that's happening in that 24-hour cycle, what they're eating and what they're doing and playing and stuff. I want to jump and include one question. Lori sent us a question, and she's got a young one, so we're kind of moving backwards for a second, but she said, it seems every night our 3.5-week-old needs an hour plus of soothing time after one feed. The rest of the feeding, she goes right back to sleep. Is there anything we can do to help her settle down back to sleep faster? Or is there something unique about that one feed that maybe needs to be treated a little bit differently? So you guys can read that in the chat window. But I'd love to give Lori some insight before we have to wrap up. Ideas for soothing? Yeah. Go ahead. Patience. Yes, Michelle. Yeah. Sorry.
Pictures popped up, so I was like, I don't know. I guess the easiest thing I can say for 3.5-week-old is just they don't understand the difference of day and night. So baby doesn't know that it's still nighttime and that it's not time to have some activity and play and start their day. So I would say for long-term help, it might not help immediately because we're not quite developmentally there yet, but long-term, if the parents can really start supporting the nighttime being as little stimulation as possible, mom and dad keeping their eyes closed, you're teaching sleep. So you have to teach sleep through showing it. So you're keeping your eyes closed, you're keeping calm, you're keeping the whole room quiet. You're not standing up and turning the light on and changing the diaper in a different changing station. And I try to keep as much next to me as possible. So I'm reaching everything with one hand while I'm still sitting still, because all of that movement and lights and everything, that's really just going to cause too much activity and stimulation for a baby to easily go back to their sleep cycle. So trying to stay calm, quiet, peaceful at nighttime is going to help the transition, but right now baby's just so little that doesn't understand yet.
And it kind of depends on what time of night this 1 hour wake up is. Is it at 8 o'clock at night where we could just be like, we'll just be up for an hour and then have bedtime be later, or is it happening at like 2 o'clock in the morning? And in which case you would deal with it very differently. So, definitely if it's nighttime, just like what Rochelle said, we want it to be quiet and boring and the least amount of stimulation as possible so that nervous system learns this is downtime. And then for when if it's a different time, then it might be totally appropriate just to be like, well, it's maybe just wake time. So just kind of depends on when in the night it's happening.
Great. Oh, Lori says it is at 2 a.m. Well, I think you guys.
Yeah, be quiet.
Yeah, keep it calm. And I know we installed dimmer switches in our bedroom, and in our daughter's room, and that really helped it stay like super dark, and everybody could go back to bed. But yeah. Okay, last question, and then we're gonna wrap up. Stephanie asked, how much sleep during the day should a 6-month-old get if he's sleeping 11 hours at night? So sounds like we're looking for some kind of guideline for the 24-hour period at 6 months old.
So when we look statistically at research, the research cross-culturally really shows that 11 to 13 hours is the average normal from 6 months on. So depending on where your baby is in that window, 11 hours is very high for nighttime sleep. It's typically 8 to 10 hours at night that babies sleep. So 11 hours could, even if they're at the 14-hour mark of total, that means 3 hours during the day. If you find that your 6-month-old is having a hard time napping, that likely means that there's too much nighttime sleep happening. We need to move some of that, shorten the night to move some of that sleep to the day. Most 6-month-olds I find need somewhere in the 3 to 3.5 hours to be happy during the day to get enough sleep, and whether that's in 2 to 3 naps just kind of depends on the kid. So that's my input on that.
I guess I would say just for naps in general, you just hit the time period where they start to consolidate. Anytime before 6 months, they're usually short and sweet all day long, and there could be 5 or 6 of them throughout the day. So you're just starting to consolidate naps a little bit. There's an adjustment in the sleep because of this consolidation, so maybe baby's still taking a 2-hour nap in the daytime, and yes, the 11-hour night will then throw off the balance of how we can spread this sleep out evenly. So like patients said, if there's not restful sleep happening in the daytime and you have a baby who's feeling a little bit irritable, not being able to maintain their day well, pulse an hour from the nighttime. At least start with an hour, drop it down to a 10-hour night, save that hour for the daytime, and see if that helps out.
Great, thank you guys. So it is 12:56, and I want to be mindful of our time today. And I think we can all agree that sleep can be very individualized to the family and to the baby. And that's why, to close, I really want to ask you guys to just share opportunities where moms can come and get more. Because I know we could spend hours going into some of these situations and at least raising up all the different factors that could be at play in kind of achieving this perfect sleep, which I don't know if that's just our own parental conception. So to close, Danielle, tell us about the new mom group, how people can learn more, and yeah, please.
I would love to speak to that, and also just really quickly, I want to say I'm somebody who believes in really finding and using resources, and we're so lucky to live in an area and time where there are such great resources. And even just listening to you guys, to Rochelle and patients talk about these things, I feel so grateful that you're out there and that they, and I refer to them all the time from the birth center, and I just really feel like that can go a long way to making your parenting experience positive, because sleep, let's be honest, sleep deprivation is real, and it's a real form of torture, as a matter of fact. And I think that can come up for anybody, especially as first-time parents, in your relationship, in your family, can be really difficult. So reaching out and finding the resources, I think, is great. So I'm really glad you guys are a part of my community. From the side of the postpartum group that I facilitate, yeah, it's ongoing. Every 6 weeks we have a new group forming, and honestly, I reach out to resources like Patience and Rochelle to come in and be our experts on things like sleep, but we talk about so much more. We talk about wellness and healthy living and all kinds of great things. So it's you can call the birth center and see how you can get involved. We usually see babies and moms partners occasionally, but baby and mom teams anywhere between, honestly, 2 weeks and 3 months is kind of our window. So that's what we're doing every Tuesday at the birth center.
Great, thank you, Danielle. Patience, how about you? Where can people learn more?
So you can go to the Family Room website, which is thefamilyroomdenver.com, or my personal website, patiencebleskin.com, to learn more. On my website, I have all of the sleep packages that I offer. The Family Room website has all of the lists of classes and things. Our sleep groups are Tuesday mornings at 9:30 and Saturday at 10:30. All ages in those. Bring your babies, bring your spouses. It's one price for the whole family to come. We have toys for the kids who are moving around and need some entertainment. And we just, you get to commiserate with the other families. Sometimes learn that you're not the worst one off in the group. There's other people who are in your situation. You get to get tips from each other and the other moms. That's one of my favorite parts about a group, is that the parents get to share with each other as well. I'm not the only one offering tidbits of nuggets of information. So we also have great play groups. If you're wondering what do I do with this small little infant who's awake? I don't know what to do, so I just try to get them to sleep. We've got play groups at various different times of the week. So the website, or give us a call.
Thanks, Patience. Thanks for being on the webinar. Okay, Rochelle.
All right. I'm with maternalinstinctsdenver.com. You can go to our website, or you can call us, and we do most of our stuff in-home privately, so we usually come in the home and work with parents one-on-one. I do consults throughout the week, and that's just reaching out, and we schedule something to go over an entire plan. And then we offer groups for mommy groups, so we'll come in and do them in sleep groups in your home. So if you have a group of friends and you all want to get together, we do mommy groups in the home for sleep support and activities for the summer. So if you are interested in the sleep side of things, that's where we spend all of our time.
Well, there's no question that there's a ton of experience and knowledge on this panel, so I just want to thank each of you for taking the time to share this information. We are going to make this recording just available on YouTube to share with other moms who may have similar questions, and You guys are fantastic resources for this community, so I thank you for that. And finally, just thanks for those of you who participated today. I hope we got some of your individual questions answered, and certainly check out a group or a private call with one of these ladies if you want to get more in depth. And lastly, thanks to Baby & Company for putting on this wellness webinar series. This is our final webinar, and we've been able to talk about everything from getting pregnant to the mind-body connection during pregnancy. On Tuesday, we talked about building our birth team, and so here we are with new parent sleep strategies, and I feel like we've really covered the gamut in terms of just hot topics. Sleep, of course, is the hottest. It's the hottest topic always. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.